Hi, my name is Martin Koehring. I'm the head of the Economist Group's World Ocean Initiative, which imagines an ocean in robust health and with a vital economy. The World Ocean Summit is an integral part of the work we do. We work very hard to accelerate the sustainable ocean economy, provide research, analysis on a weekly basis. You can find out more about the initiative's work, including the coverage on key themes discussed during the summit on our website, ocean.economist.com. I'm very excited to welcome you to day 2 of the World Ocean Summit and the first session in the aquaculture track. How to scale up aquaculture production, identifying the steps to ensure that aquaculture develops in a healthy, sustainable, and affordable way. It's really such an important topic because the aquaculture industry is set to play a vital role in closing the food security gap worldwide. And what must be done to make this happen in a healthy and affordable way? We'd really like to discuss this with our panel today. And of course, we also want to look at the roles of regulation, for example, policy, investment, technology, and finance, of course, in making this happen. We also have 2 additional sessions in the aquaculture track today. One will be on where do the benefits lie for land-based, nearshore, and deep-water aquaculture. And we also have a session focusing on feed. So we really hope that you will stay tuned for these and also join us again for the aquaculture sessions on Thursday as well. So I'm very excited to be joined today by 4 excellent and very experienced panelists in this field. First of all, Manuel Barange, he's the director of the Fisheries Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Then we have Mike Velings, he's the partner and founder at Aquaspark. And then we have Catarina Martins, she's Chief Technology Officer and Chief Sustainability Officer at MOWI. And then we have Heather Tansey, who is Sustainability Director, Animal Nutrition and Health at Cargill. You will find the full biographies of our panelists today on the screen under this media player. So without further ado, I'd like to start the session today. I would like to structure it in 2 parts. First of all, I would like to ask our panelists about the recent trends that they are seeing in sustainable aquaculture development. And the second part will be about how finance, technology, and policy can accelerate healthy, sustainable, and affordable aquaculture. So let's start really with the first part of the conversation today, really looking at the recent trends in sustainable aquaculture development. So I'd like to start with Manuel on that one, given that you have a broad overview of what is happening in the sector working at FAO. According to FAO, actually, aquaculture could provide 2/3 of seafood for human consumption by 2030. And aquaculture has been the fastest growing food production system over the past 5 decades. Is this growth sustainable, and what needs to be done to achieve sustainable growth? Manuel?
Yes, thank you, Martin, and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I think that it's important to put this in context as to why do we want aquaculture to continue growing. I mean, aquaculture has been, as you mentioned, the fastest growing food production system over the last 5 decades. We have to realize that we live in a world where to feed 9 billion people, as we will be needing, we need 50% more food than today. And aquatic ecosystems only produce about 2% of the caloric intake that we take. So there's a significant imbalance in the way that we produce food in the world. Aquatic systems form 70% of the planet and yet only produce 2% of the caloric intake, while land ecosystems are under severe pressure to produce. And if we need to get this 50% more food from land ecosystems, we're going to create much more environmental damage than we already have. Now, aquaculture has been growing very fast, and now the production globally is about 80 million tons, just over 80 million tons of fish, mollusks, and crustaceans, which is very similar, same order of magnitude as fisheries, capture fisheries. And in addition, aquaculture produces 30 million tons of seaweeds. Now, this has allowed us to, every one of us, to increase our per capita consumption of fish products from 9 kilograms per person in the 1960s to 20.5 kilograms now. And this growth in per capita consumption has outpaced population growth. What that means is that, in fact, aquaculture has allowed us to make a net contribution to the nutrition in the world and improve the nutritional condition of the population, which is quite remarkable. There are actually 39, 40 countries in the world that now produce more fish through aquaculture than through capture fisheries. And that together, those 40 countries accumulate more than 50% of the population of the world. So aquaculture has become very much in balance with capture fisheries in terms of volume, in terms of production, in terms of consumption, and it has not replace capture fisheries. What it's done is actually allow us to leap ahead in terms of our nutritional capability.
Great, thanks a lot, Manuel, for highlighting how important aquaculture has become and increasingly is becoming in terms of fulfilling the global needs for healthy nutrition, affordable nutrition, sustainable nutrition. So I'd like to go to Mike next, because Manuel has just highlighted the spectacular growth in the aquaculture industry in recent decades. With your vast experience in investments to boost sustainability, what do you think are the most important steps to ensure sustainable aquaculture development?
Oh, thank you, Martin. There's quite a bit of opportunity, and it's also good to understand that sustainability is a key aspect of being a successful operator in aquaculture, and it's as such a really broad topic with lots of opportunities. But what we have been seeing in the last few years, step by step, is an increased attention for example, land-based aquaculture, closed systems in salmon farming, for example, RAS, which has gotten quite a bit of attention. At the same time, that said, from a global perspective, that's still just a tiny percentage of our global aquaculture production. What we see in terms of trends and things that people sometimes easily forget is that there's a lot of growth and sustainability gains to be had in, for example, traditional pond farming, which is still by far, if you talk about fish and shrimp, by far the largest contributor to global production compared to open net cage farming, for example. And after years of promise, we finally are seeing that the companies in the innovation space, in the tech space, are really starting to come to market. Where a couple of years ago it was mostly promise, now we finally see that hard data is finally really attainable. Look at an example like eFishery, for example, an automated feeder company based in Indonesia, delivering a wealth of data across tens of thousands of farms with the great environmental savings, but also enabling farmers direct access to finance. And we really see things like that take off in different countries, in different opportunities, and it's finally really on the eve of a really massive breakthrough in aquaculture in general. And the same goes for feed ingredients. After years of promise, we now finally see real plants and real plants being built in, for example, at the insect space. Protix, one of our portfolio companies, has a commercial plant operating. Insect in France is building a really large plant. Calista with single cell protein is building a plant in China. It's all really on the verge of breakthrough, and we predict that in the next few years we are going to see a massive shift change in aquaculture and towards more data, better and more sustainable feed ingredients, and a really increase in the capacity for sustainability. That said, aquaculture is already, or has the potential, without all of this already, to be by far the best food system available to us. But this is just going to increase it so much more.
Great, thanks a lot, Mike. I mean, you have highlighted some really important points there about these new opportunities. I mean, these kind of breakthrough technologies, but also more sustainable feed is one of the key ingredients for the sustainability trend in aquaculture, and that is a great segue to Catarina, because you obviously have some things to say about that as well. And Catarina, according to the research commissioned by the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy, the ocean could provide over 6 times more food than it does today equal to more than 2/3 of the animal protein needed to feed the future global population. This is research that is very encouraging in a way in terms of what aquaculture can provide. MOWI is one of the largest seafood companies in the world, with fish farming operations across the globe. You have stated that your vision is to lead the blue revolution. What does that mean?
Hello, Martin. Yeah, indeed. So MOWI has the vision of leading the blue revolution. And what does that mean for us? It's really unlocking the potential of the ocean to produce more sustainable and healthy food. This connects very nicely what you have just mentioned, the high-level panel and the blue papers that have been released last year in 2020, and the final report also very recently, which really highlight the importance of the ocean, not as a victim, of climate change, but actually as a solution of climate change. And it's really great to see that, Martin, because we, being a seafood producer, of course, this is, embedded in what we believe, but having hundreds of leading scientists and heads of state talking about that indeed seafood and aquaculture is one of the sustainable ocean economies that will play such an important role in challenges for humankind like food security and climate change. It's really important. I don't know if people actually know about it, but fish, as compared with other animals, land protein, they are really climate friendly. And that is because they don't need to spend any energy on keeping their body temperature like a mammal has to do. So only, almost like by default, it is extremely efficient from a resource point of view, that every feed that you would actually give to a fish, it would convert in a much more efficient way to actually protein that humans can eat. So that, in combination with the fact that seafood is so healthy, if you think from an omega-3 perspective, if you think from a full portfolio of vitamins, of iodine, etc., it's very difficult to match that combination of being a healthy food and also being so climate friendly. So I think really seafood has a key role to play in the years to come.
Great, brilliant. Thanks a lot, Catarina, for highlighting both the climate aspect but also the nutrition aspect of aquaculture. And all of you really have touched upon this aspect. Manuel, Mike, Catarina, farm seafood is a key component of feeding our growing population. You've all kind of consistently said that. And feed represents up to 90% of the environmental footprint of a farmed fish. So I would like to go to Heather to ask you, obviously you represent Cargill, a major feed company. What are you doing to help reduce this footprint?
Thank you, Martin. At Cargill, our purpose is to nourish the world in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. And we see aquaculture as a key pathway to that. And earlier, Manuel really articulated the issues facing us from a global population rise. And so we're really keenly thinking about how do we create higher quality feed solutions with a smaller impact on the planet. And we're really leaning into doing this, I would say, in three kind of key focus areas. The first is around advancing more sustainable feed ingredients. So we really want to lean into different types of feeds that will help reduce the overall footprint. The second, and it connects clearly to the first, is simply helping our farmer customers to do more with less. So we're innovating solutions that increase fish efficiency. So leading into our core nutrition capabilities that enable our customers to actually use less feed to produce that same, pound of salmon at the end of the day, or pound of shrimp. And then the third piece, which I think is critically important, is really safeguarding the health and welfare of farmed fish. So the health of farmed fish is so intrinsically linked with the health of our planet's oceans. And so if we can we're really looking at developing solutions that focus on keeping fish healthy, because when fish are healthy and thriving, that's when they're growing and those systems are the most productive. So really, those are our key three focus areas. And I'm hoping, and I can maybe give a little plug here, our president, Pilar Cruz, will be presenting as part of the summit on Thursday. And she's going to talk a little bit about how, leaning into these three focus areas, we're really building a new approach to aquaculture sustainability through our value chain at Cargill. And it's through our See Further sustainability initiative. So I hope you all get a chance to listen to that.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Heather. And thanks also for highlighting that we have another great session, actually several great sessions that are dedicated to feed and also as part of the aquaculture track that will address some of the questions about feed in more detail. So that's brilliant. We will have, of course, several sessions later today and then on Thursday, as you mentioned, Heather. But it is really important, as Heather just did, to highlight how crucial sustainable feed is for scaling up aquaculture production for better health and environmental outcomes. And I think you have all consistently said that it's really about better health and environmental outcomes. But really radically redesigning fish feed and animal feed more broadly is one of our biggest challenges, but also opportunities affecting food security and also climate change and health, as most of you have also said. So, Catarina, what does MOWI do in terms of sustainability of feed? What are your key initiatives to become less dependent on fish meal and soy, for example?
Yeah, great question, Martin. I think as we have heard before, I mean, feed is really a crucial element on sustainability. From a sustainable sourcing perspective, also from a climate footprint perspective. I mean, it's clearly one of the biggest components if you really consider your scope 3 emissions as well, which we have been tracking this for 2 years now, and we have a very good understanding of what that is. So for MOWI, the approach we have been taking is that, well, for and foremost, the feed raw material that we use needs to have strong sustainability credentials. And that basically means, for example, that the fish meal or the fish oil that we source, it needs to be certified with external third-party certifications that do ensure that there is a strong environmental and social sustainability behind those feed raw materials. And I'm talking about MSC certification, I'm talking about EFO-RS, I'm talking about fisheries improvement programs that ensure that the type of fish meal and fish oil we are using does indeed come from sustainable sources. So that is really an important element when it comes to the marine raw materials. You've talked also about soy. Soy, it's also a very important feed raw material for the salmon industry. The approach is, again, to source it sustainably. We do it using certifications like ProTerra. And we have also been working very hard with our soy suppliers to guarantee, and this has actually been on the media recently, that we are working towards not only having the soy that they sell to the salmon farmers, deforestation free, which is the case already today and for a couple of years, but actually go beyond that and guarantee that in their entire supply chain, they actually do that commitment as well. And that is really, I believe, a milestone which our soy suppliers have committed to. This has been applauded by NGOs, WWF Brazil, and also the Rainforest Foundation in Norway, for example, which is, I believe, really a leading example to the other, animal food sectors as well. So in that respect, I think the salmon industry is really leading the way. Now, some of you have also mentioned, I believe it was Mike, when it comes to the alternative feed raw materials. This is really a hot topic at the moment. We have heard about single cell proteins, insect meal, algae. So there's plenty actually of alternatives that have been researched for the last couple of years. And as Mike says, we really see that they are coming to a point, well, at least some of the suppliers, where the combination of these different elements, when we talk about feed ingredients to an animal, you have to consider, the climate footprint element, you have to consider the nutritional element, you have to consider the scalability, the cost. So all these elements are quite important. And what we see is that some of them are reaching, let's say, that sweet spot that will indeed, motivate, I think, the industry to move in that direction.
Okay, brilliant, Catarina, for highlighting that. It's really this sweet spot that you mentioned that we are trying to find, and aquaculture has the potential really for us to find that sweet spot of climate friendly, healthy nutrition that's affordable and scalable. And some of the innovations and ideas you mentioned are a great step forward in that. I'd like to remain with the kind of technology and innovation topic more broadly for a bit. And go back to Heather on that one, because we'd really like to know a little bit more about what the role of innovation in advancing aquaculture can be. So, I mean, Cargill sees as the most promising types of innovations I mean, you have already mentioned some of the things that you're doing at Cargill. What do you see as those kind of innovations at Cargill that drive sustainability and better sustainability practices, and how is Cargill adopting these?
No, thank you for the question. It's innovation, I think, is such an important focus for our sustainability efforts in aquaculture. You know, in our aquaculture space, we invest more than 10 million a year in innovation and R&D research. And kind of building on what Catarina was talking about, you know, we're really thinking about it is that sweet spot, right? So we're standing up capabilities to look at the overall life cycle impact of ingredients that our customers are using. We're also thinking about how can we scale those ingredients to use them more effectively. So if I deep dive a little bit into ingredients as an example, you know, similar to the way Catarina was approaching it, we look at things both in terms of our improving more traditional or conventional ingredients. Take as an example fish oil. That's where we're looking at increasing our use of trimmings, which is byproducts of fish caught for human consumption. We can take some of the parts that are not used by humans and make that back into fish oil. So really creating more of a circular economy. We're also looking at new and novel ingredients. That's I think, an exciting focus for a lot of our work. We have a partnership with the NovaFeed that we just announced, I think, a year or so ago. And this is where we're looking at using insect meal and actually black soldier fly larvae as a key ingredient into feed. And we're focused, Cargill sits at a really interesting point in the value chain in that we are making feed for our feed customers, but we are a agricultural company that reaches, you know, back into the agricultural supply chain as well as forward into the protein space. So in that case, we're looking at, can we use the byproduct from our wheat milling to actually feed those soldier flies? So we're trying to think holistically and think with a life cycle mindset on how do we drive innovations in the aquaculture space.
Great. Thanks a lot, Heather, for highlighting this holistic view. And that's really important. And you mentioned how important it is to have this understanding of the different supply chains, the ones that supply towards your products, as well as the supply chain that you are in when your product goes forward in the supply chain. So this is such an important point. Having talked a little bit about those kind of innovations in the in the space of feed, I'd like to go a little bit into a different direction, because we also have Mike, who obviously has a lot of experience, not just in this area, but also more broad in terms of investment and finance, which is another of those accelerators, of these enablers of sustainable aquaculture. And obviously, innovation is also required at the finance and investment space. And aquaculture and seafood more broadly have not been included in the EU's recent classification system for green investments, which is quite unfortunate. And so, Mike, I'd like to ask you, do you think policymakers need to rethink their attitude towards aquaculture? And also more broadly, what role should finance play in ensuring a sustainable aquaculture future?
Well, thank you, Martin, for that question, because it's actually a really important topic. And yes, even though aquaculture has been on everybody's agenda in an increasing fashion over the last couple of years, and also with policymakers, it's hardly enough. And the fact that you are now bringing it to the forefront at this summit is really important. But aquaculture is generally something that seems to be a little bit forgotten, and which is really strange if you think about how large it is globally, and what role it can play in food security and everything that Manuel laid out at the beginning of this session. It's really strange that people don't have more attention for it, and policymakers don't have more attention for it, because it's really important for them to really drive this conversation. It's really important that we develop this industry and the growth of this industry, which is expected to at least double by mid-century, maybe even triple if we could, and to really make sure that that development is going to happen in a sustainable way. And government can help make sure that the right things will develop by putting proper zonal management programs in place, by making sure that we are stimulated to use the right type of ingredients, by saying, well, hey, by this time by this point in time, this ingredient needs to be phased out, or you get like extra points if you use this. There's a lot to be said for a strong government and more attention from policymakers on aquaculture. It's probably also a little bit explainable because the US and Europe have a relatively small aquaculture sector, except for Norway and Scotland with salmon and some sea bass in the Mediterranean. It's a relatively modest industry if you compare it to fishing in Europe, for example, or if you compare it to aquaculture in Asia, where this would never happen. And all of that said, then still, I think very few people actually really realize what the opportunity is here. And that's the other part of the problem. And this industry traditionally has been very few really large public companies, like, for example, MOWI, and a lot of small to medium enterprises that are flying kind of under the radar with no finance activity, especially in the smaller company section. So a lot of companies are self-financed, which means that a lot of this industry is more or less flying under the radar, which also means that there's very limited data on what a good investment makes, etc., which makes it traditionally harder for other investors to enter the space, which is a real pity. And take just the feed ingredients, for example. I will need tens of millions of tons of feed ingredients by mid-century. And the amount of opportunity, if you think about that, the largest insect plant today is producing not even 5,000 tons of product. If you think about the opportunity of tens of millions of tons, you kind of get how large the opportunity can be. It's billions and trillions of dollars of investment opportunity in the next few decades, and it's all just lying there. It's not easy, but if you have the right knowledge and the right access, it's something that a lot of investors should take a bet on. And it's the perfect ESG investment with great sustainability criteria, with increasing sustainability if you do the right thing. And there's massive rapid gains to be had. Like if you look at new technology, even in salmon farming, for example, you can save. It's not just other alternatives and lower footprint of the feed ingredients used. It's also making sure that we use it way more efficiently than we do today. There's so much opportunity. It's hard to start even.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, great. Would anyone like to react to Mike's point?
Yes, Martin. Yeah, just to build up on that, Mike, I think what you said was really just so important that I need to share this with you just in case people don't know. But there are some benchmarks, and one that I would like to share with all of you is the FAIR index, which is Farm Animal Investments Risks and Returns, which actually evaluates the 60 largest animal protein producers in the world. And on the top rating of these, you will find a lot of aquaculture companies. So they are really leading the way in terms of investment. And that is really just to build up on Mike's view that there is indeed an incredible opportunity there for investments, which is really recognized also from a sustainability point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely a great point. Mike, would you like to react?
Yeah, thank you, Catarina. But just to point out that is only at the tiny tip of the iceberg if you look at this sector, because that's only the really large public companies, and 95% of the industry is not included. So it's so much bigger.
Mm. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And you highlighted that there is still a lack of data on what is happening and what good investment opportunities are like, and also for highlighting not only the opportunity in finance and investment in the sector, but also that government can do some things, like, as you said, zonal management, stimulating growth in this sector. So there are these opportunities. Any final points from anyone on this? Manuel?
Well, actually, I'd like to just perhaps bring it a little bit in context, because, when Catarina mentioned, that we are in a near sweet spot, and then the issue is that there isn't a single sweet spot. And if you look at the panel and the composition of this panel, we all come from a very European, American sort of developed world context. And from that point of view, I think from a business perspective, I think that there is a very sweet spot that is been found. But the majority of the aquaculture actually comes from China. As you know, 60% of the production comes from China, 85% from Asia. And if there's one place where aquaculture needs to develop, that is Africa. Africa that only has 2.5% of the global production of aquaculture, that Africa will be the only continent that, unless we do something about aquaculture development there, the only continent where per capita fish consumption will drop by 2030. Just think about that, So just think, where is food needed? Well, Africa will have a drop, and there the difficulties are completely different from the difficulties that one has in developing aquaculture in say in Europe or in the US. You need an enabling environment, which yes, you need it too in other places. Policy regulation, access to land, access to water, incentives, and what have you. But once you go into the technical elements, when you look at Africa, you don't have enough feed, you don't have enough finance, you don't have enough fingerlings, you don't have good biosecurity controls and disease controls, you don't have good extension services, and you have particularly completely undeveloped value chains. And all these elements, if you look at them individually, have a great potential to develop aquaculture in Africa, but we have to start very quickly, and we have to stop now. We can't delay this any further.
Okay, great. Mike, would you like to react to that?
Yeah, we thank you, Manuel, because that really perfectly lays it out. We have 2 investments currently in Africa, one in Mozambique and one in Madagascar. But because of all the reasons you've just pointed out, together with our partners, IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative here in the Netherlands, Mazingi, which is DFID and the Gatsby Foundation, and some others, and some DFIs that we are talking to at the moment, are set to launch an aquaculture fund specifically focused on Africa by this summer, just to build that infrastructure to make sure that that we have a good chance of preventing consumption and production going down instead of going up, because this is the last thing that we should want.
Okay, great. Thanks.
And it's a great investment opportunity.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Mike, and also for highlighting, Manuel, the opportunity, and that there is that Africa is definitely an area where there could be more. But thanks, Mike, for highlighting that there is investment now coming. We had a couple of audience questions actually submitted, and before we come to the end of the session, I'd like to ask those questions as well. And thanks a lot for sending these in. And one is actually linked to what Manuel was mentioning in terms of the different kind of geographies that have particular focus on aquaculture. So Rich Innes from the Joint Ocean Commission Initiative submitted this question. With the world's population fast approaching 10 billion, the need for high quality protein that has a low carbon footprint has never been greater. Do you see the United States emerging as a leader in aquaculture, particularly finfish aquaculture in federal waters? What do you see as the main barriers? Manuel?
Thank you. So I think that in the US, like in Europe, the biggest issue about further aquaculture development is actually consumer perception. Aquaculture in some sectors has got a very bad reputation and is completely wrong, and that has to change. And the way of changing is, first of all, by having governments providing proper regulation, proper policy control, incentives, and providing that clarity of message to the consumer that this is not only a very good quality protein, is also environmentally much friendlier than other land-based animal protein production, and furthermore has a great capacity for growth, which is not available in other places. I mean, Catarina mentioned as well the issue of climate change. Climate change in the oceans is going to be a big issue. For fisheries, it's going to be a big issue. But when it comes to aquaculture, because you have a controlled environment, you have a much better way of dealing with it. What I think that in the US we need, or the US needs to do, is to make sure that clarity as to how do you compete with other industries that make use of the land or the water. This is a great competition, and it's lack of clarity as to how it works. But I like to also, when you talk about the US, let me just talk on the other side about China. Because there's also this perception that China is sucking all the fish of the oceans and for their own consumption. And China is one of the countries that is actually a net exporter of fish. It's a net exporter of fish because of the aquaculture development. And the US is one of the largest importers of fish around the world. So if you think about that, you can understand the potential for the US to develop aquaculture industry and rely less on imports.
Great, thanks for highlighting this potential. Would anyone like to make a comment on this? Yes, Heather, and then Mike.
Great, thank you. I would just probably underline the comment about clarity that Manuel made. At Cargill, we think there's a lot of opportunity in the U.S. for seafood, and we're part of Stronger America Through Seafood initiative. And one of the things that we really want to elevate there is we believe that sustainable seafood production in America could be really great for and really powerful for the country as a whole. But one of the challenges is that we think that there is a lack of clarity in some of the permitting processes because you have overlapping jurisdiction of different agencies. And so we really think that that's a critical thing that we need to do is be clearer and make the permitting process a little bit easier for our farmer customers to really then start to grow the business in the U.S.
Okay, great, thanks. And very quick, Mike, because we have one more audience question.
Yeah, there was just going further on Heather. It's what Manuel said is all true, but it's also a legislation problem, and it's not in my backyard syndrome. Like a lot of people that have a lot of capital reside on the ocean front and don't want a farm in their backyard. So that is a really big part of the issue in the US. So until you get real onshore farming or offshore farming, like outside of federal waters, I don't think that's going to happen, if I'm honest.
Okay, great. Thanks for making that point. Catarina, yes, quickly, I have a question for you from the audience, but you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, maybe we go into that last question, Martin. Just to point out that when it comes to U.S. consumption of seafood, we really see that there is a huge potential there, and we also see that regulators, they are updating their nutritional guidelines when it comes to seafood consumption, which is great news, and hopefully it will also motivate people to eat more seafood. I believe, at least if I think about MOWI's approach, one thing that we strongly believe is also to make the salmon category much more interesting and appealing from a consumer perspective. So this is why I think, branding in that perspective will also, have an important role to play when it comes to increased seafood consumption. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for making that point. We have one last question from the audience, and it's from Douglas Whaley from the Eurogroup for Animals. What place does fish welfare have in responsible production and consumption? And maybe, Catarina, you already highlighted what MOWI is doing. Could you just briefly answer this question?
Yeah, sure. So it's definitely an important question. As any animal producer, animal welfare is an ethical responsibility. So it connects very strongly with reputation of your business, but also with production, really. I mean, if fish are in a good state of welfare, then that will also be reflected in, less issues, less diseases, etc. So it's on everyone's interest, including the farmers in first place, to get the animal welfare as best as possible. If I might just give you an example, which maybe people don't really know, but if I think about, salmon farming in Norway, for example, and coming back to the fact that we produce our food in the ocean, which connects very nicely with the natural environment where fish, belong, so to say. So from that, if you like, nature approach to welfare, I think ocean farming positions very nicely. And, the open net pens that we have in the ocean, they are huge. This is actually 98% water and 2% fish in those, net pens in the ocean. So the animals, they have an incredible opportunity to actually choose where they want to be. And in the ocean, as we also heard Manuel mentioning the climate element, when there are changes in temperature, etc., actually having such, big net pens in the ocean allows the fish to select which temperature profile, etc., and oxygen profile they would like to be. So coming back to welfare, definitely an important issue, which of course we are looking very closely. We have underwater cameras, so that we have a visual observation on how the fish are doing, everything that, from training to not using antibiotics in a prophylactic way, so they are only used if extremely necessary. And just to add on that, maybe people are also not informed about it, but actually, and again, using the Norwegian example, vaccines have been such a huge success that hardly any antibiotics are used for salmon production. And there's still out there a misconception, that this production is full of antibiotics, which is not true. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks a lot, Catarina, for highlighting the welfare dimension and also, again, the consumer perception dimension. And it's been really fascinating. And thank you so much to all of the panelists for their time. It's been a great conversation. Luckily, we actually have 2 additional sessions in the aquaculture track today on land-based, nearshore and deepwater aquaculture, and a focus session on feed as well. And we talked and touched upon that topic already. So I really hope you stay tuned. Just in terms of summary, I mean, we have heard a lot about consumer perception and the importance of, that we highlight that, aquaculture is climate friendly, it's nutritious, affordable. Of course, there's the affordability and cost questions for some of the investments and the scalability questions that were also highlighted. And then I mentioned that this is, all part of the circular economy in a way. There are lots of new innovations, for example, new and novel ingredients. The importance of supply chain sustainability was highlighted by the speakers as well. And the enablers, really. I mean, what the enablers are to really have this kind of development towards sustainable, healthy, and affordable aquaculture. So policy, zonal management was mentioned, incentives by governments, innovation and technology was mentioned, of course, finance, and seeing the finance opportunity was also highlighted. So I'd like to thank you all again for your great contribution, also to the audience for sending in the audience questions. So I hope you stay tuned for the sessions today and join us again for the aquaculture sessions on Thursday as well. Also remember to check relevant content on Blue opportunities, including aquaculture and other topics from the World Ocean Initiative's website at ocean.economist.com. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your summer.